today is Transformation Day, and I like to start today with just a bit of a frame about the use of the tools and about attitude. About what, please? Attitude. About attitude, about the attitude with which we apply everything. And how many people here feel that your attitude has something to do with your success in life? Okay, we're in the right place. We're on the same page. So your attitude has something to do with your success. And, over the last 13 years, I've sought out the best, the what, please? Yes. The best tools, the most cutting-edge tools, the most recent tools for designing your life in the way that you want, for creating the mosaic of a life the way that you want. And tools are fantastic, but I would say that more important than any tool or any technique that I've ever learned or that you'll ever learn is attitude. It's the attitude and the philosophy with which you apply the techniques. And it's that important that I've begun every Sunday morning when we start Transformation Day to have just a little conversation up front about this attitude. And the attitude and philosophy is something that we've woven throughout our entire Fast Track to Success because it really is that important. There's a lot of people that have tools, that have techniques, that haven't done a darn thing with them. Does that make sense? Yes. Is that a yes? Yes. Thank you. So a lot of people that have never applied the techniques. I knew a lot of people when I was studying my old NLP classes and things like that and the various personal development trainings that I did along the way, there are a lot of people that were learning this stuff but weren't applying. Weren't applying the techniques. How many people can relate to what I'm talking about? Any way, shape, or form? All right. So, I think that the attitude that I've brought to the mix and that was gifted to me, because it truly is a gift, came to me from martial arts more than anything else. It wasn't really in personal development where I found it. It was in my background in martial arts. And I've been a martial artist all my life. I think I started my first karate class when I was 10 years old. But I got my black belt when I was 21 years old. And it was interesting because I had a martial arts instructor when I was younger. And he was an ex-Navy SEAL. He was just he had a couple of loose screws, but I loved the guy. The guy he was my hero. Anybody have a hero when they were growing up? Somebody you really looked up to? Yeah, as a kid, this guy was everything to me, right? And I really looked up to him so much. And I learned a lot. What he instilled from an early age was a sense of discipline. What's the word, please? Discipline and commitment. What's that one? Commitment. And one more time, level 10. Commitment. Thank you. So discipline and commitment. And this whole attitude of perfecting and perfecting and perfecting, because in martial arts, it's an art. Right? And so there's this attitude of perfecting your art. And when I was younger, I remember, I told you this the other day. I said, I walked into the classes, and the whole attitude was that there were no excuses. No what, please? No excuses. If you were late for class, that was 500 push-ups on your knuckles, and it was not fun push-ups, right? Like they'd make us, when we came in, we'd do the push-up, we'd be down on our knuckles, you'd do the push-up, come up, punch, push-up. It was he was a little twisted, right? A little insane. And we come in, but if you were late, and you had to do 500 of those, if you were late and you had an excuse, it was 1,000 push-ups. So it's like, I'm late, no excuse, right? So it was this whole attitude of just showing up, no excuse type attitude, that I'm so grateful for today. And like I said before, I don't think I'd train with somebody like that today because it was a little bit militaristic, if you will. But nonetheless, it was a great foundation. A great what, please? Foundation in terms of attitude. And so there was this no excuses type attitude. I remember, I don't know if I mentioned this earlier on, but my weapon, because we would learn weapons as well, and my weapon was the nunchaku, the double sticks one with a chain. And I remember when I was a kid, I'd be using the nunchaku, and I was doing one time a kata. And a kata is simply a simulated fight between 3 or more people in prearranged movements and techniques. It's a dance. And so I'm doing this kata with the nunchucks, and I remember I nailed myself in the shin, and blood started pouring and seeping through my gi pants. But I was like 13 years old, but I knew that I couldn't stop. I knew that I had to keep going. And I think that whole attitude, we talked about Bushido. What's the word, please? Bushido is warrior spirit, right? Keeping your spirit high. And that whole attitude was something that was infused from an early age. And it was interesting because he would say to me, he'd say, keep your spirit out of the gutter. And it was negatively phrased, but it made a good point. Because the moment, if I was looking down, he's like, get your spirit out of the gutter. It's like, And it changes everything, right? It's just a little shift in attitude, a meta frame that we put over life or anything that's going on that changes the way we view things. So I'd get my eyes up high, breathe from the top of my lungs, and all of a sudden it would change the way I felt about things. Now, Those attitudes were really important. But there's one attitude that I want to talk to you about more than anything else that's made a really profound impact in my life. And it was the attitude of showing up. Of what, please? Showing up and doing whatever it takes to achieve the goal. Not in a needy way or I got to get the goal. But in a way of showing up day in, day out. Having the discipline and having the commitment to do whatever it takes. Turn to somebody next to you, slap them a high five, say, I hear that. So showing up. And I asked you this question before. In martial arts, who do you think it is that got the black belts? Was it the people that went to a weekend course, yes or no? Was it the people that read a book on martial arts, yes or no? Was it the people that saw the DVD, The Secret of the Martial Arts, yes or no? No. It was the people that showed up day in, day out and did the work, who did what it takes and who would put in the work and had that level of discipline to polish up every weakness in their game until it became their greatest strength. And that's the one attitude more than anything else that determines your level of success in life, I believe. Now, I had a great instructor at one point, a great martial arts instructor who once told me that champions are not made in tournaments. You know, if you think of the winning of the belt or the winning of the tournament as being analogous to any dream or goal that you have. How many people have dreams or goals? Say aye. Aye. So we have dreams or goals, but champions are not made in the winning of those dreams or goals. Champions are not made in tournaments. Champions are made in training. Where are they made, please? In training. Right? It's what you do on a daily basis that gets you to the tournament that allows you to then win that tournament. Does that make sense? Yes? And so many people get caught up in the neediness around the goal, the neediness of making that goal happen, and what they fail to get is what they need to get in order to become the type of person who makes the goal. Does that make sense? Yes? Because people get ahead of themselves. And so when I was young, I would show up to class day in, day out. I remember I lived in Lake Tahoe, Nevada, and I'd run to the dojo or the training hall when I was, before school and the snow was on the ground. I'd go out there early in the morning and I'd work out and I'd train every morning before school. And I had this attitude of discipline and the commitment and really perfecting the art. And I moved up through that system. And it was one of the best experiences, one of the best foundational experiences of my life. And they taught us a lot of techniques, just like you'll learn a lot of techniques here. You'll learn a lot of techniques throughout the entire fast track to success. You'll learn a lot of techniques, hopefully, if you continue, and I pray that you do, that you continue your education beyond the fast track. And wherever, as you continue to make more and more distinctions, you're going to learn a lot of techniques along the way. But what's more important than any technique that you'll ever learn is the attitude with which you approach it and the philosophy with which you approach the use of those techniques and the acquisition of those techniques even more importantly. Well, actually, both equally importantly. So what was fascinating was a few years later, I told you I was working for Club Med for 6 years. I did that, and I was a sports director. So I was in charge of windsurfing and scuba diving and sailing and all the sports and the golf and all that. And I was in Sonora Bay, Mexico. And this is in Costa Carias in Guaymas, Mexico. And I was down there, and I had been living out there for about 9 months in this resort. And one night, I was doing a show on stage, and I was doing a kata, which is a martial arts kata, a dance, and I was doing a demonstration on stage. And one of the people in the audience came up to me and said, hey, have you heard of this thing called the Ultimate Fighting Championship? Now, by the way, how many people have seen those cage fights and stuff like that? Now, you may be totally opposed to it. Regardless, I think it's great. I love this stuff. I love the strategy of it, right? I mean, it's my passion. I love the sport, and I love the strategy. And they said, I don't know if you've seen this. They've got these cage fights. This was back in 1994 when she came to the resort. And I said, cage fights, what are you talking about? She said, yeah, they're taking all these martial artists, they're putting them inside these cages. And they're putting sumo wrestlers and Greco-Roman wrestlers and jiu-jitsu people and karate and the kickboxers. They're putting them all inside this ring and they're letting them fight it out to see which style's the best. And I go, which style's the best? Of course. Ha, ha, ha. My kung fu's better than your kung fu. Right? So I'm going, which style's the best? Come on, we know whose style's the best. What are you talking about? Right? Now, my martial arts style that I had studied up until now, and by the way, I'm not just talking about martial arts, am I? No. Okay, cool. My martial arts style, the style that I had studied was... it was called Twin Dragon Temple System of Kung Fu Wushu. Wow. And it was closely akin to a style called Chinese Goju. And my instructor created the style with another man by the name of Ron Van Cleve. He was known as the Black Dragon. He was an 8th degree black belt, Ron Van Cleve. My instructor was a 7th degree black belt, both under Master Peter Urban in the style of Goju-Ryu. And so they created this style. Anybody ever see that old movie, The Last Dragon, with Taimak? Anybody see that? Yeah, Taimak, we would say he's my temple brother. He was in the same system. So that movie, when that came out, was kind of fun because that was all our system of martial arts. And so I had this hero. The person that I looked up to my instructor, but I also looked, Ron Van Cleve was like the man, right? There's the Black Dragon. He has dragon tattoos on his forearms. Guy's cool, right? Like, he's my hero when I was a kid. And so they said, whose style's the best? Of course it's mine, right? Then I said, well, and I was telling this woman who was talking to me about the Ultimate Fighting Championship and how, they were putting all these people in the ring, and she was a martial artist as well. She said, well, Ron Van Cleve, because I mentioned his name, she said, he was in it. I said, fantastic, tell me about it. And she says, well, he got his butt kicked in like 30 seconds. I said, what? No. She said, yeah, the skinny little Brazilian guy, Royce Gracie, beat him in like 30 seconds. He didn't even get a shot in. Now, Royce has become a good friend since then, but I was like, what? Beat him in 30 seconds. No, I don't buy it. She said, I'm going to send you the videotapes. So she sends the videotapes to the resort, right? I'm waiting for these suckers. I get a couple of videotapes, these bootleg videotapes she sent in there. The only video player we had in the resort was in the horseback riding stable. How you guys doing, by the way? Doing good? Slap somebody a high five. Say, I love being here. So I go to the horseback riding stable late at night, and I pop these videotapes in, and I'm watching, and I'm just transfixed. Right? Have you ever been so engrossed in something that you're just sitting there and you're drawn into it? Who's ever had that experience before? Right? So there I was, like much as you are now. And so there I was, and I'm sitting there and I'm watching these videos, right? It's like, my God. And this little skinny Brazilian guy, Royce Gracie, comes out there, all these other fighters are big, they're muscly, and he comes in, and he did what everybody in all the martial arts, what they used to claim to be able to do, where the little guy beats the big guy through technique. And it was amazing. He's taking them out, and all he was doing, these big guys coming, these kickboxers, and he just came in and he'd grab them, and then he'd wiggle around where they couldn't punch or kick him anymore, and then he'd choke them out, or, it was just like, what the heck's going on? Like a little anaconda or something, right? And it's like, dang. So now I'm waiting for the fight with my hero, right? Ron Van Cleve is going to go in there and fight. I'm waiting for this sucker. Ron goes in to fight. Royce Gracie comes in. Ron throws a kick. Doesn't even come close. Royce takes him down. 30 seconds. The guy's tapping out. Tapping out means giving up. And I'm watching this thing. Like, this is my hero. This is everything that I've studied all my life. I'm like, do you mean to tell me that everything I've been doing is meaningless? And it was like, I've been studying, I've been practicing. I had the discipline, man. I was showing up every morning. I'd go before school, and I ran in the cold with no underwear on. I mean, I'm serious, it was not pleasant, right? But I went in there and I had the discipline in it, and now all of a sudden it was meaningless. Not every day, the underwear thing. That was just on a couple of days I remember it stood out in my head. But it was like, well, it was cold. But it was like, wait a second. I've been studying all my life, and all of a sudden everything I learned had been rendered useless. But at the same time, I was in this place where it's like, no, I learned a lot of stuff. I knew a lot of stuff, but I was also inspired. Because it was like, there I was, as I was sitting there, much as you are here now with me. As I was sitting there watching this thing, I was inspired. Because it was like, wait a second, maybe there's something else to learn. Who's ever been in a place like that, ever, in their life? And it's like, wow, maybe there's something else to learn. Maybe there's something new that can add to my game here. And so I made a commitment right then, right there, that I was going to master this stuff. How many people understand what I'm talking about? Right? It's like, yeah, I'm going to learn this stuff. There is something to learn. And so I got really clear that I'm going to master this stuff. It's like, you're going to get this, you're going to master it, you're going to do whatever it takes. And so when I left, one of the reasons why I left Club Med when I did was because I wanted to study. right? So I knew that it was time I was going to go back, and I was getting kind of excited. So the moment I left there, I moved back to the States, and I moved specifically right next to where the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu Academy is. How many people have heard of the Gracies before? Now, dear friends, the whole family, very, very cool people. And so I moved to the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu Academy. Now I go in for my first lesson. And this was back in the day. Hoist was teaching all the classes personally, and his older brother Horian would show up for some of the classes. And so I go in for my first class. Now, do you think I got to wear my black belt? No. The black belt went to the side. Come in with a white belt, beginner, right? Came in, and I got my butt kicked left and right. And so I'm in there, and it's like starting all over again. Right? But I still had a lot of energy and enthusiasm for it because it's like, I was learning something new. It was like this whole new world of possibility was opened up for me. You know? It's like the old jiu-jitsu motto, what they used to say was, I am a shark, the world is my ocean. Let's see, what did he say? I'm a shark, the world is my ocean. The others can't even swim or something like that. And it was, but the whole idea was that when as grapplers, they would just grab the punchers and kickers and take them down into this territory where they didn't understand. And so I went in, I'm learning all this new stuff, and it's like a grappling art with joint locks and submissions and chokeholds and fun stuff like that. And I'm going in, but I'm tapping. That means giving up, left and right. I mean, they were just wiping the mat with me. They were destroying me. And I went in there, and I decided, I'm going to come in with the same attitude, with the same what, please? Attitude that I brought to earlier martial arts, where I just show up day in, day out, and get better, right? Slap somebody high five, say, I get that. So I was going to get better. I was just going to improve it. And has anybody ever had the experience of where it's like you go through waves, where sometimes you learn something, and then maybe you move away from it a little bit, and then you have to relearn that concept later? Who's ever had that happen before, right? So that's kind of how it was with me, because I'd be showing up, and it was a little bit frustrating, but I was having fun. I was at this new art. And now in jiu-jitsu, the way it goes, and by the way, I'm not just talking about jiu-jitsu, am I? Okay. In jiu-jitsu, the way it goes, you have stripes on your belt. So you have a white belt, and then you get some stripes. Then you get 4 stripes, then a blue belt, then 4 stripes, then purple belt, then 4 stripes brown belt, 4 stripes black belt, and then lots of stripes. And so I'm showing up each and every day, and it was fantastic because I was actually getting to train with a guy who I saw beat my hero, and the attitude was completely different. The Brazilians are some of the most cool people on the face of the planet. Any Brazilians in here? I so love the Brazilian culture, They're just very, very cool. And Hoist, fighting with him, it wasn't the militaristic style. He's like, hey, Chris, it's good to see you, man. Hey, come on, let's roll a little, okay, Chris? He comes in. It's like, okay, Chris, don't fight too hard. Don't beat me up too bad, okay, Chris? Okay? And he's like, all right, Hoist. And he's like, and then, and I wanted to win so bad. How many people have ever been in the place where they wanted to win really bad? Who's ever been? I wanted to win. It's like, And I'm like, okay. And Hoist is, fighting with Hoist was like fighting with water, rolling with water. He's like, oh, Chris, you're so tough, Chris. Oh, come. I'm like, oh, Chris, you're so strong, Chris. Fight harder, Chris. Fight harder. Oh, you're so strong, Chris. And so, but it was fun. I was having fun again. I was learning again. It's in that environment where, who's ever gotten to the point where they thought they knew a lot, and then all of a sudden they found there was a whole much more to learn, but they were having fun doing it, by a show of hands, right? So that's how I was. I was in that type of an environment. And what I realized is that learning could be a lot more fun. They have a whole different style and a philosophy in terms of teaching that was different from anything I had learned before. I had a harder, even though I showed up when I was a kid, that was a style that I couldn't approach in my adult life because it was like, just a different style of learning. I did it. It was fantastic. But here I was opening up a whole new world of learning where the learning was fun. So it was easy to go in. I'm having fun and being playful, and I'm learning a whole bunch of stuff. This whole new world's opening up to me. They got this Californian surfer type attitude, but they were some of the toughest martial artists in the world. Hoist, in his heyday, was beating 4 and 5 different people a night in no holds barred, anything goes fights, like one after another, and just the nicest guy in the world. It's a great attitude. And I'm like, wow, this is amazing. And their attitude toward training was just a playful attitude. They just had fun. And so I was going in there and I was training every day. But then what happened was pretty soon I started to get some stripes on my white belt. Now I'm feeling pretty good, right? Going into my classes. Now I'm not tapping out so much anymore. I'm learning some technique. Some of the other people are tapping out. Oh, yeah, all right, yeah. Okay, yeah, I got this stuff. until they put me in the intermediate class. So I get to the intermediate class. And all of a sudden, here I come in, my white belt, some stripes. I go in there, they got blue belts and purple belts in the intermediate class, mostly blue belts, and some lower, high-level white belts, and high to mid-range blue belts. And so I go in there, and these guys are just kicking my butt left and right. And they're tapping me out and tapping me out. Now it's getting frustrating. And there's some, tough guys coming in, and I'm in there and I'm fighting, but I'm tapping left and right, and I'm feeling like, am I getting better? Yeah, I'm getting better. But you ever have those times in life where you're learning something? It's like, at first you feel like you're learning, and then you hit a plateau. Who's ever had those experiences before? Right? And what a lot of people do is they stop at the plateau, but it's when we push through those plateaus that we have the learning curves that go up again. And then we'll hit another plateau, and it's the same way. Sometimes it's like when we're learning, it feels like we're taking a lot of steps forward, and then all of a sudden, sometimes it feels like we take a step back. Who's ever had that experience? And that's how it was for me. Some days I felt great. Some days I felt like, well, what the heck? I've been studying for so long and I just got beat pretty badly. But I kept trying to remind myself of this attitude of just showing up. Of just what, please? Of just showing up, plugging myself in, knowing that my game was getting better every time I was doing it. Every time I showed up. By the way, does this happen in one class? No. Is that a yes or a no? No, thank you. Does this happen in one weekend? No. This happens over a lifetime. Over a what, please? A lifetime. And we're not talking about techniques or tools. We're talking about artistry. Right? We're talking about mastery, but beyond mastery lies artistry. This is the artistry of living is what we're learning here. But there I was learning a martial art. And so I was showing up, and it doesn't happen in one day. It doesn't happen in one class. It happens with this whole attitude of discipline and commitment. So I'm showing up, but now I'm getting pretty frustrated because I'm getting beat a lot, especially by the purple belts, right? So it's like, and there was just a few purple belts inside those intermediate classes back in the day. But then what happened was, I all of a sudden I was doing better in my business, and it's like, now I got some cash. How many people have ever thought that if they had all the money in the world, that one of the things that they'd really want to do is train with the best instructors in the world, whether it be for language or sport or whatever it is, or for your business, get the best mentors, best instructors. I always had that attitude. I remember when I wrote down some of my initial goals when I was starting on this path, that was one of the things that absolutely I was going to do. I wanted to create all this cash flow and all this money so that I could train with the best instructors in the world because I knew they'd help me make better distinctions. Better what, please? Slap somebody a high five, say, that's right. All right. So I always want to change it. Now, Horian Gracie was the older brother. And Horian Gracie was Hoyce's older brother, but he was the best instructor that I'd ever encountered any place, anytime, anywhere, even outside of martial arts. Horian was a master instructor. So now I had my blue belt. And I think I had like one stripe on my belt, and I had some money. Now, Horian's expensive. He's $400 an hour. But it's like I had waited I waited to the point where I could afford to do that type of training. And it's like, and by the way, I've always considered myself to be like an Olympic athlete. How many people, once again, are totally committed to making their goals and dreams occur? Say aye. Aye. How many people think they might pour even more energy into making them occur after they leave here? Say aye. Aye. All right? So if you're going to be pouring consistent energy in, making your goals and dreams occur, then if you're pouring that level of energy in, I think you ought to consider yourself to be like an Olympic athlete. And you ought to treat yourself the same. So for me, a lot of the things that I used to think as being extras or being the luxuries in life, I now think of as being necessities. Does that make sense? Like every day I'm backstage at lunch, while most people are having lunch, I'm back there getting a massage every single day. When I go to train in jiu-jitsu, I find the best instructors. I'm always training with Horian Gracie. I'll train with them, 3 to 4 times a week when I'm back home, even though it's expensive, even though it's $400 a day. I'm doing it because I feel like I'm an Olympic athlete. I'm worth investing in. Does that make sense? Yes, in terms of foods and stuff like that. There's some things that are non-negotiable at this point, right? And those are necessities. They're no longer luxuries. They're necessities so that I can play at the top of my game. Going on holidays, doing things like that. A lot of people say, I don't. I work 7 days a week. No, not me, right? I was in the Golden Door the week before I came here. The week before that, I went over to Tony's Resort in Fiji for a couple of days just to rest. I'm constantly putting those types of things in because I've got to perform at peak levels. Yes? Yes. Is that a yes? Yes. Yes. Do you have to perform at peak levels? Yes or no? Yes. Do you deserve it? Yes or no? Yes. So I've made an effort to train with the best of the best. All of a sudden, I had the opportunity to train with Jorge and Gracie as my private instructor. You better believe I took it, right? Because I could go train, and I do. I train with the local black belts whenever I travel around. But the distinctions that Jorge helps me to make are by far more superior to anything that I'm going to get anyplace else. I can train with a black belt here, but when you train with Jorge and Gracie, you're getting from source. Does that make sense? Right? So I always seek him out. When I go back home, I go back to train with him. And so I started training with Jorge, and sure enough, he's helping me make better and better in distinctions. I'm doing better and better. So then, they moved me up into the advanced class. Right? And so now I'm going to the advanced classes, and I'm rolling with, there's purple belts in there, there's brown belts in there, and the purple belts are destroying, what's the word, please? Destroying me, left and right. Like there is no opportunity to win anymore. Right? They're just playing with me like a cat plays with a mouse. I mean, they're totally playing with me every single day. I'm traveling around the world now, and I'm starting to train in every country where I go. So I'm training with the local black belts wherever I go. Everybody please stand for a second if you would. Stretch all the way up, 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 up. Left hand side, let out a moan. Oh, yes. Right hand side, let out a moan. Oh, yes. All the way back. All the way forward. Shake it out. Slap somebody a double high five. Say, you have the mind of a champion. Have a seat, feeling great for no good reason. Here we go. Have a seat, feeling great for no good reason. So I'm traveling all over the world. I'm training with, and I always wanted to train with the purple belts or the brown belts or the black belts. Wherever I could find the black belts, I would. And then I go back to Jorge all the time, whenever I could. And so now the purple belts are really killing me. And at this point, I'm going, I'm starting to get frustrated. It's starting to bug me because I'm tapping so much. I mean, it's like, in my head, I'm going, well, you can only lose so much and still be happy, right? And I was losing all the time. How often? All the time. Was I really losing? No, because I was showing up. But I didn't think that, right? So I don't know if you can relate, but I thought, for me, it felt like I was losing. And so I was, because every day I was tapping out, tapping out, tapping out. So in my head, what I really wanted was the purple belt. I wanted the purple belt, yeah? And I wanted it bad. And so I'm going in there, and I want the purple belt, and I'm thinking in my head, I'm trying to figure out, how do I get it? How many people have ever seen something out there that they really wanted, and they're going, how do I get it? How do I get it? Who's ever been in that space? Yeah? So that's where I was. I'm like, how do I get it? How do I get it? I want that purple belt. How do I get it? I got it. I just have to beat the purple belts. If I can beat the purple belts, of course, I'd be awarded the belt because it would be totally inappropriate to just ask for the belt. And I didn't want it unless I deserved it, right? Unless I earned it. So I'm like, okay, I got to beat the purple belts, got to beat the purple belts. So I go into my lesson with Jorge, and I'm stewing here, right? And I'm thinking, should I say it? Should I say it? I'm like, I said to him, I want to beat the purple belts. And Jorge just looks at me, nods his head like that, and then continues the lesson. As if nothing had been said. And in my head, I'm going, crap, I said the wrong thing. He's going to think I'm a jerk, like I want to beat other people. I'm in my head, I'm going, how enlightened is that? You know, I go home that night, I'm like beating myself up. I'm like, come on, now he's going to think I'm a jerk. And I go in the next morning for my lesson. I go in, he's waiting for me. I come in, I'm like, hey, Jorge. You know how last night or yesterday I said to you that I wanted to beat the purple belts? You know, I didn't really mean that I wanted to beat other people. I just meant, I just want to, I want to get, am I thinking about this in the right way? I mean, I just want, I want to do well and I want to improve. And he looks at me and he says, Chris, he says, while I hear what you're saying, that you want to beat the purple belts, he says, I'm concerned. He says, I'm a little concerned, Chris, that you're so worried, you're so focused on winning that you're not going to get what you need to get in order to do that. Think about it. He said, you're so focused, you're so out here needing to make it happen that he said, I'm afraid that you might not get what you need to get in order to get that. He said, Chris, what you really need to do is focus on you, focus on your game, focus on becoming the type of person Who earns the purple belt? The purple belt will surely come, Chris. He says, that's a goal. He says, it's a great goal. And then the brown belt and the black belt. He says, those are great things to have out there. He says, but you have to focus right here, right now, on getting what you need to get. And he said, what you need to get more than anything is not how to beat the purple belts. He says, what you need to get right now is how to relax. Now, I don't know, you guys ever see you guys have the television show Married with Children out here? You guys have that out here? The father on there, it's Ed O'Neill, he plays Al Bundy. And like he trains with Horian on the off, like he'll train on Tuesdays and Thursdays. He goes in there on those mornings. And I'll train on the Wednesdays and Fridays. And here's what Horian says. He says, now Ed, and Ed's a brown belt. He says, now Ed, he relaxed right away, Chris. Very relaxed guy. It's like everybody needs to get relaxed. Not everybody gets it right away, Chris. He says, you may have to work at it for a while. Ed, he relaxed right away. I'm like, so he said, what you really need to get right now is to relax. That's what you need to get in your game. He says, it's about taking every weakness in your game and polishing it until it becomes your greatest strength. He says, the goals, you got to let them be there. He says, what you need to do is focus in the right place. And too many people focus out there. It's like my good friend Keith Cunningham. Does anybody know Keith? Keith he was like the brains behind the Rich Dad, Poor Dad books. A lot of that content came from Keith. He was our guest speaker at our Billionaire Adventure Club just recently. And one of the things Keith says, he says, one of the biggest problems that people have when they're moving forward in terms of really making their dreams happen is that they fall in love with the dream rather than falling in love with the process. He says, dreams are a dime a dozen. It's execution that produces results. How many people fall in love with the, oh yeah, I'd love to weigh my ideal weight. I want that. Or I love to have a business that made a lot of money. Boy, I'd like that. They sit around falling in love with the dream. If falling in love with the dream was what made it happen, then every kid that ever dreamed of having a couple swimming pools and a big house would have it. It's not about falling in love with the dream. It's about falling in love with the process. And it's about focusing in the right place. Because if you fall in love with the process, the dream will surely come. And so, here's what he said. Here's what Horian said to me. He said, Chris, he says, what you really need to do is get relaxed right now. He says, I feel it. He says, you want it so bad. You want to win so bad, Chris. And he says, I feel this. He says, when you're going for a choke, for example, he says, I feel you coming a mile away. You want the choke so bad. He says, you telegraph it. He says, I feel it. He says, you're fighting for that choke. He said, if that's the case, if I feel it coming like that, he says, then it's just strength versus strength. He says, if I'm stronger than you, he says, I'll beat you. He says, Chris, you need to relax. And he said, in relaxing, you see all these opportunities that open up. Maybe it's not the choke that the guy gives you, Chris. Maybe you're going for the choke, but then you see he gives you the arm, and you take the arm, you break it. He says, Chris, he says, maybe he gives you the leg, you break the leg. He says, Chris, there's so many opportunities that open up for you if you just relax. He says, but you miss all those opportunities because you're so focused on needing to make it happen. He says, like Chris, he says, if you're mounted on the guy, he says, then you take his gi, you cool him off like this, Chris. Why? Because you're a nice guy, Chris. You cool him off. He needs a little cool. He says, you sink one hand in. He says, then you wipe the sweat. Then you take the choke, Chris. He says, you just got to be sneaky, Chris. And be relaxed. And be open to all the opportunities that are there before you. He says, and the only reason why you're having a hard time relaxing right now, getting this most important lesson that you need to get right now, he said, the only reason is because you're afraid to lose. And he said, we need to take away your fear of losing. Because when there's no fear of losing, you can be totally relaxed. And he said, Chris, the hardest thing in a fight is to be relaxed. He said, but you got to get rid of your fear of losing first. So he forbid me to win for 2 years. For 2 years. He forbid me to win. He says, I don't want you to win. He says, when you go and you roll with guys around the world, he says, just tell them, yeah, I'm not feeling all that well today. I'm feeling a little sick, so please go easy on me. And he said, and then you just go in, and he said, and it says there's no disgrace in tapping, Chris. There's no disgrace in tapping. He said, he said, but every time you tap, you ask the guy, how did you do that? How did you do that? And you undo it, and you learn. You what, please? Learn. What's the word? Learn. Slap somebody high five, say, you learn. Learn. Thank you. He says, every time you tap, you undo it, and you say, how'd you do that? And you learn how he did it. He says, he'll never get you that way again. He says, and then pretty soon, not only the purple belts won't be able to tap you, he says, but the brown belts and the black belts, they won't be able to tap you either. He says, and that's the first step. It's kind of like, there's so many people that are afraid of failure. How many people know people that are afraid of failure? Yeah? It's like you go to the gym and you work out, but the interesting thing is that the key to growth, the key to what, please? Growth. The key to growth is to push it to the point of failure. If you go to the gym and you don't push it to the point of failure, you don't break the muscle down to cause growth. Does that make sense? Yes. You have to fail to succeed. You have to fail to grow. You have to. That's the process. Right? But there's people that are afraid of failure. It's like, wait a second. That's the only way that you can grow. You have to push it to that point of failure in order to get the growth. The key is distinguishing between a fatal failure in life and a failure that's a failure that causes you to grow. Right? Because if you go to the gym and you jump on the leg press machine and you do way too much weight and you blow your knee out because you did too much weight, that's a fatal failure. It causes you not to be able to work out anymore. But you have to, so the key is learning to distinguish between those types of failures. But you have to go in, push it to the point of failure in order to get the growth that you want. So it's about failing forward. And essentially, that's what he was teaching me how to do right now. So I would go and I'd travel all over the world. Is this making sense? Yes. Slap somebody high five, say, this is making sense. Yes. How many people want to have the mindset of a champion? Say aye. Aye. All right, turn to somebody next to you, slap them a high five, say, that's for me. Yes. So I start traveling all over the world, right? And I'm going and I'm training with the various different black belts and brown belts wherever I was training. And I'm relaxing, and my whole key is to relax. I'm tapping out left and right, but now I'm having fun doing it. And that's a big difference. Is that a big difference, yes or no? Yes. Huge difference. So I'm having fun every time I'm tapping. And I'm saying, how do you do that? And in my head, I got this little secret spy plan. Right? It's like my secret spy plan is, I'm learning new stuff. Oh, it won't get me that way again, right? So I'm learning how to do it, and I'm learning the game. I'm going out there, and I'm losing like crazy, but I'm really winning. Does that make sense? Yes. Yeah, because I'm making new distinctions. I'm learning. I'm growing. And so all of a sudden now I'm starting to plan. I'm starting to relax. I remember I was rolling with a guy. I went into a school in Perth, and I was rolling with some of their purple belts there, and I heard one of the purple belts go to the main instructor, and he says, man, rolling with him is so deceptive because it feels like he's not even fighting at all. Feels like he's just so relaxed. It's like, it's just weird. It's deceptive. I'm thinking, yeah. So now I was in Brizzy. I was in Brisbane. And I go in there, and I'm rolling with a brown belt there, and he couldn't tap me. And I called up Horian. I was so excited. I got an answering machine. I'm like, Horian, I was with this brown belt, and he couldn't tap me. I get a call the next day on my voicemail. Hey, super champion. I'm impressed, but I'm not surprised. So now I get to go back home. I'm getting ready to go back home to train with Horian again, right after a tour. I'm going, I gotta get some stripes on my belt. Gonna get some stripes. I'm so excited, right? I go in there, nothing. Man, I was there training for like 2 weeks with him. Nothing, no stripes. I'm like, what the hell, man? Didn't you hear me say? I didn't say this to him. Right? This is in my head. I'm thinking, what the heck? So I go back on the road, and I'm training again. I'm focused on being relaxed, getting the lessons that I need to get, right? Learning how not to tap. And sure enough, I'm tapping less and less and less. And I'm just staying relaxed. I'm being playful. I'm having fun. And I'm learning and I'm growing. I'm coming back, and I'm thinking, all right, now for sure, I'm going to get some stripes on my belt. Nothing. What the hell's going on here, right? Okay, when touring, almost a whole 2 years, I got no rank increase. At this point, I'm starting to think, well, who gives a crap? I don't want the purple belt anyway. I want to be the best blue belt in the world. Seriously, it's like, man, forget it. Just make me a great, yeah, that's all right, yeah. Watch the purple belts try to tap me. Come on. Fight harder. So now I'm feeling like I'm just going to improve my skill. I'm going to be the best blue belt in the world. I'm feeling pretty good about it, right? So I'm traveling around, and then pretty soon I come back, and I'm going for the lesson with Horian, and he calls his youngest son, Horan, down. Now, Horan's 4 years old. He was at the time. So he says, hey, Horan, come on down here to the room with me and Chris. So Horan comes in, his little white karate, his little judo kimono, and he's got a little white belt on. He comes in with some stripes on it, right? He says, and Horan's 4 years old. He's like a kid like this big. And he's like, okay, Horan, get in Chris's guard. He says, Horan, pass his guard. Now, Chris, choke the boy. He says, now, Chris, don't hurt the boy. He's only 4 years old, Chris. And so I'm rolling with this little 4-year-old boy. And he's like, now, Chris, do you see how soft, how light and how relaxed you have to be with the boy? He says, but he's fragile. He says, now the purple belts play with the blue belts. He says, to play, it's a whole nother level. He says, this is how relaxed you have to be, Chris. And so I'm rolling with the boy, and I'm thinking about it. The boy goes out, and Horian steps outside, and he comes back in, and he throws 2 stripes on my belt at once, which I never dreamed of that. I thought 1 stripe at a time. He puts both stripes on, and he says, Chris, I hope you appreciate the method of my madness. He says, I just want to make sure that you're ready. And he says, and I train you like I train my own sons. And so he gave me 2 stripes at once. And at this point, I'm feeling pretty good. And I'm like, and I almost said, I'm like, I wanted to say, are you sure? But I didn't, of course he's sure. He's the master. Are you sure? But in my head, I'm like, oh, wow, man, yeah. So I got the 2 stripes. I'm feeling pretty good. But it was mattering less and less. And he said, now, Chris, it's time to start learning some attacks. He says, but I want you to keep that same level of relaxation. All right? How you guys doing? Great. Slap somebody high five, say, I'm doing great. So he says, I want you to keep that same level of relaxation. He says, but now we're going to learn some attacks. And so he says, okay, now the first, and he started teaching me some chokes. And, he says, and before he wasn't letting me attack at all. So now he's like, okay, here's a choke. And I knew a bunch of attacks from before, but he like took it out of my arsenal for a while. And so now he's like, okay, here's a choke. He says, now Chris, when you're going around and you're fighting, he says, you put it in there, wherever it's appropriate, you go for your attacks. He says, if you're rolling with somebody who's a lot better than you, Chris, like a brown belt or a black belt, they have years of experience. He says, but if you do it in the right way, he says, you can get the choke. He says, and when you do it, he says, the ultimate sign of victory, Chris, is if you get the choke and then you let it go. Like if you know you've got it, he says, don't choke them all the way, especially if they're better than you, because if you get them, he says, they're going to want to kill you the next time, Chris. He says, the ultimate sign of victory is if you get it and you know you have it, and then you let it go and you let them save face, Chris. He says, especially when they're better than you. And so he starts teaching me these chokes. So I'm going around the world, and I'm traveling in different places, and I'm training, and I'm staying relaxed. Now I'm starting to put in these new elements to my game. By the way, does this happen in one class? Yes or no? Does it happen by reading a book? Yes or no? By seeing a DVD? Yes or no? No, it happens through discipline. What's the word, please? And commitment and focus in the right place. And so I'm learning these techniques. And so I go out there and I've got the techniques, I got it down, and then pretty soon I was in Brisbane. I was training over at Queensland University, and I was training with a black belt, Brazilian black belt. And I'm rolling, totally relaxed, and I got the choke. Now, I've gotten the choke before, but it's usually when they let you get it, right? And they'll let you get it to learn and grow and all that. But this time he didn't let me get it. I felt that I had the choke, and I knew I had it. And he knew I had it. And I saw his eyes get big and surprised. And it was at that point that I let it go. That night, I went home. I call Horian up, right? I call him up, and I'm like, Horian! I got voicemail again. Horian! I was rolling with this guy. He was a black belt. I got the choke. He didn't give it to me, and I let it go, and I let him save face the whole bit. Oh, it was so great. I get a message the next day. Hey, super champion. I'm impressed, but I'm not surprised. So I go back, and I'm thinking, more stripes, right? But at this point, truly, I was caring a lot less about it. A lot what? Less. Because it wasn't so much about the belt. I was just having fun learning. I was having fun growing. And he said something very interesting to me. He said, Chris, the belt costs $7.99. The knowledge is priceless. What is it? Priceless. And so I just keep training. I'm just like, I gave up on the purple belt because the rank increases were coming so few and far between, it just didn't matter anymore. And I remember, and I'm training all over the place, and I'm getting better and better, and I'm holding my own with a lot of different people. And I'd start training with some of the best in the world in the different places where I was training, and they're saying, hey, your game's pretty good, And I was feeling pretty good at this point. And I came back, and I think I got to the point where I had 4 stripes on my blue belt, And so I go in, and one day Horian's not there to train with me, and so I train with his older son, Henner Gracie, who's a 24-year-old young buck. He's a strong kid. And so I'm in there, and I'm rolling with him, and Horian comes walking by the door, and he looks in, and they start talking in Portuguese. I'm like, something's up. Right? They're saying something. And Horian walks away, and he comes back over with the purple belt in his hand. And he's holding it up. And Henner looks at me and he's like, yeah, I was just asking my dad, like, why isn't Chris Howard a purple belt? He should have been a purple belt a long time ago. Now, the funny thing is that, the biggest lesson that I took from the whole experience was getting back to something that I knew before. It was about showing up. It was about just showing up and having fun. And he said something interesting. The master did. He said, Chris, you don't have to memorize jiu-jitsu. You just have to enjoy it. You don't have to memorize this stuff. I had people come up to me yesterday walking up saying, I don't know about this technique, and I had a hard time going through the process, and there I was, and I don't know if I got it right, and I was having a hard time visualizing. Wherever you are is right where you're supposed to be. All you have to do is enjoy this stuff. But also remember that it's not done in a class. It's not done in a, how many people feel like they're learning a lot this weekend? By a show of hands, say aye. Aye. How many, I guarantee you, we haven't even started. Today is Transformation Day. What day is it? Transformation Day. You guys are going to learn so much. Your heads are going to spin. We're just layering process after process after process. But remember, this is just the beginning. Here we're white belts. Maybe we're going to get a stripe on our belt by the end of the weekend. Right? But the learning, it goes on. This is a process. And with discipline and commitment, and everything that we teach inside the fast track, it's not about techniques. It's not about tools. It's about artistry. It's about the artistry of living, designing the mosaic of a life exactly the way you choose. Not the way I choose, not the way somebody else chooses, but the way that you choose. And you can get to that point if you only focus on where you need to focus. Now, Horian gave me a great metaphor at one point that I want to share with you because it really made a profound impact in my life. Chris, he says, when you and I are doing jiu-jitsu, he says it's like a chess match. He says, either of us have the same opportunities before us to win the game. What determines who wins the game is who can look into the playing board and think 3 and 4 moves in advance. He says the novice chess player is still learning how to move a pawn or learning how to move a knight. What allows you to look into the playing board and think 3 and 4 moves in advance, or Donald Trump to look at the building and see something different, or Warren Buffett to look at an annual report and see something different than anybody else might see. What allows you to look into the playing board and think 3 and 4 moves in advance is knowledge and experience. Where you get knowledge and experience, he says, some people try to figure it out themselves and do it their way. They try to figure out the whole game. You play with a champion chess player, you're done. He says, what allows you to look into the playing board and think 3 and 4 moves in advance is who has the most knowledge. What's the word, please? Knowledge. And experience. What's the word? Experience. Thank you. Where you get the knowledge and the experience is saturation environments such as this, good coaching, good mentoring, people that have played the game before. You seek out the best distinctions. And he asked me, he said, Chris, why do you come to me? Why do you want to train with me? I said, because you're the master. I said, I know that I'm going to get distinctions from a black belt over there, from a brown belt over here, but I want to come to source. Does that make sense? So it allows you, what allows you to think 3 and 4 moves in advance on the playing field of life is knowledge and experience. Where you get that is from saturation environments like this, coaching, great mentoring, books, all that stuff. The culmination of that stuff gives you the ability to do that in any environment. Gives you a different situational awareness. A different what, please? Situational awareness. Right? But people try to figure it out their own way. They think they got it. They get premature closure. And they stop training. They stop going for it. Right? Could you imagine somebody wanting to play at the peak of their game, getting premature closure? Why does Tiger Woods continue to work on his golf game? Because he's a champion. He's got that mindset of a champion. How many people want to embrace that mindset or are making a commitment to embrace that here, now? Say aye. Aye. Ooh, say aye. Aye. Slap somebody high five so you have the mind of a champion. Now, I got to share with you something. It came full circle. Because it was just about 2 years ago now. You know, when Hoist was going in to the Ultimate Fighting Championships and beating everybody, just wiping the wiping the card. What the hell am I trying to say? When he was going in there and beating everybody in the early days, beating 3 or 4 people in a night, which is really unheard of today because they've changed the rules. It's not even done the same way anymore. Before, they just throw you in, no gloves, nothing, no holds barred. They just say no biting. In fact, they had the groin shots were okay. All that stuff was okay. And they just said no biting, and that was it. I mean, you could pull hair the whole bit. And so, so the rules changed. And I believe that there's been more breakthroughs in martial arts in the last 10 years than there were in the entire 100 years previously because there's this big melting pot. So they've been throwing all these styles, and all of a sudden, everybody was cross-training. And so the game has evolved over the past 10 years. The same thing in personal development, right? It's no longer where people are clinging to one style, right? So the game in martial arts became less about who's got the best style to who was the best cross-trained. Does that make sense? Yes, because now everybody's going, oh, well, you need that. You have to have all those skills. So the game became different. You had stronger and younger athletes coming in, learning all the same skills that these guys knew. It was like a secret before. Now everybody's doing it. And so the game has evolved. And it's the same thing in personal development. That's why I say we're the next generation of sciences, and we're not just clinging to one methodology. It's like use whatever it works, whenever it works. And so there's been some huge breakthroughs. And it came full circle because I was in Seattle, Washington. And I was doing this seminar, the Breakthrough to Success seminar, and Hoist was going to fight again 14 years later, right? So he's a little past his prime. He's coming back, and they got all these young bucks. The game has changed, and Hoist got destroyed in this fight. And it was his like return comeback fight. And he got beat very quickly by a young, strong guy using jiu-jitsu techniques, and it's just a different world. Right? And I'm sitting there watching the fight, and I was with my coach. Remember I told you I have a coach, I pay $2,500 a day? He happened to be at this fight with me, and we were sitting in there, and we were actually in a bar watching the fight in a pub. And I saw the fight, and I'm sitting there, and I kind of knew that Hoist wasn't going to win because I saw him the week before, and you could see it in his eyes. You know, I'm like, hey, go get him. He's like, hey, yeah. And I could just see that you know how you can see that look in somebody's eyes? You know, you ever see that? It's like the mindset of a champion. Who's ever seen that before? It's like this person's on it. They're going to make it happen versus they're not. And I just didn't see that in his eyes on this fight. And he went in, and you could see that his spirit was kind of in the gutter at this point because it was a big challenge for him. And he came in, and he lost. And I was sitting there, in my head, I'm going, you know, I just didn't quite, I was trying to figure out, what's the word? Meaning. What's the word, please? Meaning. I was trying to figure out what did it mean so I could figure out how did I feel about it. You know, because I wasn't feeling very good because I didn't have the meaning clear in my mind. Right? So it's like, hey, Chris. He says, maybe the meaning is, and he says, when you look at this, he said, maybe the meaning of this is that we just have to be humble. Because part of the problem was this young guy who beat him was just this cocky young kid. Right? And it was just a young punk, and I don't mean that in a negative way. Kind of, yeah, because he pissed me off. But he was cocky about it. And it's like, wait a second, this guy, you know, Hoist paved the world for martial arts, and he brought, you know, he passed the baton over to these guys, and it's changed the whole world, changed the way everybody trained as a result of it. And this young cocky kid comes in, oh, well, yeah, and he was just talking a lot of smack. And it's like, wait a second. What about respect for the people that came before you, about the people that paved the way? And that's what my coach had said to me. He's like, you know, Chris, maybe it has something to do about passing the baton, because no matter how great you are, no matter how what, please? No matter how great you are or how great your game, there's always going to be the next generation. Does that make sense? Yes. He says, and maybe what it's about is about giving respect and paying respect to the people that came before you, and then being willing to pass the baton at the right time. And I thought about that, and that made a lot of sense, because it's like, have there been a lot of people that have come before me in my field? You better believe it. You know, masters, people that have come before, that have brought great things to the table that I get a benefit from, that we get a benefit from today because they were there. A lot of great master instructors throughout the years, right? And then, and when I say that we're the next generation, I believe that, but then there's going to come a time where we pass the baton to the next generation, and they take it way beyond anything we could do with it. Does that make sense? Yes. Is that a yes? Yes. Thank you. So, yeah, that made a lot of sense to me. I'm like, okay, well, that's part of the meaning, is this whole thing about respect, and this whole thing about being grateful for the people that have come before us and passing the baton, and knowing that there's going to be a next generation, and great, you know, doing it with gratitude and with humility. But also there was something more, and I was trying to get it. It's like, what else is there that I need to get? What's the meaning of this that'll cause me to feel good about this situation? And I often ask myself that question. And then I got the other piece. And the piece was that the game is constantly evolving. It's constantly evolving. And there was a quote that I heard once, and it was this. I heard lots of quotes, but there's a quote that I heard that really fit into this, what I was grappling with at this point in time in my mind. And the quote was this: "The learning shall inherit the earth, while the learned will be very well equipped for a world that no longer exists." The learning shall inherit the earth, while the learned will be very well equipped for a world that no longer exists. And that's true in every context of life. The game is constantly evolving. The learning shall inherit the earth, while the learned will be very well equipped for a world that no longer exists. So no matter what level your game is at, doesn't matter, no matter what level, maybe you've mastered business, or not mastered, when's mastery come? You know, I don't feel like I've mastered this. And people say you're pretty good. Well, thank you. But are there greater levels to attain, yes or no? Yes. Always. What's the word, please? Always greater levels to attain. Right? So, and the key is enjoying it, enjoying the process. Maya Angelou, the poet, said, you got to do what you do so well they can't take their eyes off you. You know, Andrew Carnegie from U.S. Steel said, if you want to ensure your success, your preeminent success in anything, he said, make yourself the master of that. And the game is constantly evolving. It's a constant game of learning. Of what, please? Learning. Slap somebody a high five, say, I'm into that. Does not matter what level you're playing at. Doesn't matter how spiritually evolved you feel you are, or how evolved in your relationships, your health, or how evolved in your business. Is there always more to learn? Yes or no? Yes. Is there always more to learn? Yes or no? Yes. Slap somebody a high five, so there's always more to learn. Somebody, and it's the same thing. It's the same thing with what? It's like there's always the next level. It's like we got to constantly be improving and adapting and evolving our game. Doesn't matter how good we are. Doesn't matter what point we've come to. There's always more to learn. Somebody asked me once, what's the secret of success in your mind? And I'll tell you very, very clearly what's been the secret of success for me, anything that I've been able to achieve and will continue to achieve in the future, is heart and spirit. When I talk about that, I mean the warrior spirit, Bushido. When I think of heart, it's part of spirit for me. But it's also heart in terms of what we talk about in Design Your Destiny, in terms of being aligned with what you were born to do. So the secret of success is heart, spirit, and the willingness to find the right guides each step of the way. The willingness to find the right guides each step of the way. It's like, what am I going to learn? What am I going to learn? What am I going to learn? You know, Arnold Schwarzenegger was asked, what's the secret of success for him? And he said, find a mentor, pass him up. Find another mentor, pass him up. Find another mentor, pass him up. That sounds a bit predatory. But there's a lot of truth to that methodology in terms of how it works. Is there always going to be somebody that can take us to the next step? Yes or no? Yes. Yeah, when I found my business partner, I mean, the guy had built a $70 million retail business. He was making about $9 million a year from passive investments. You know, fairly successful in terms of what most people would consider it to be in financial terms. Right? And he's taught me a lot. But then I'll tell you, when I go, hang out with Richard Branson, talk to him about my business model, and he'll pick it apart inside of 30 seconds and tell you, here's where the potential challenges are. Why? Because of the knowledge, because of the what, please? Knowledge. And the experience. The what? Experience. Is there always more to learn? Yes or no? Yes. How many people are committed to constantly improving every weakness in their game until it becomes their greatest strength? Say aye. Aye. How many people are committed to realizing that it's about focusing on who we are and becoming the type of person who can make our goals happen? How many people realize that that's the key? Say aye. Aye. So you got a level of commitment. We just got to keep our focus where it needs to be and fall in love with the process of becoming that type of person. Then pretty soon you find yourself 5, 10, 20 years in the future living those dreams that you always had, but you realize that those dreams were just milestones. You put them out there. You use the process of strategic visioning, and then you get your focus in the right place. Remember, champions are not made in tournaments. Champions are made where? In training. Where are they made? Oh, I can't hear you. Where? All right, fantastic. Please stand.